I am Brenda Bence, and I'm Coach to Win.
Go get me some knowledge.
So what country are you in?
I'm in Singapore.
You're in Singapore.
Yeah.
Why Singapore?
Well, first of all, I moved here about 14 years ago, so it's been a while. And I actually, Christian, I've lived overseas almost 30 years now. So I've lived outside the US a long time. I started with big corporations who moved me around the world. And
Yeah.
then I started my own business. And I started in a different country, but then decided this one was really a great place to be. I work globally, so it just makes sense to be in a really global location. Great
Oh,
airport that I can fly anywhere in the world. And I like warm weather.
I felt like this would be a really cool conversation
Yeah.
because I thought there were so many similarities between what executive coaches do and what sports coaches do. And let me just read a list of things to you that I think are some qualities that sport coaches need to have. You tell me if this is the same thing that you think executives need to have. If you can just humor me real quickly, okay? Goal setting.
Yep.
Would that be one thing that, okay, so goal setting, team dynamics,
Yep.
okay, motivation, accountability. Is that something that you coach a lot?
Absolutely. Mhm.
Okay. Skill development, strategic thinking. Is that one? Is that another quality?
Yes, absolutely. Still
Since
more. There's still more.
I have more. I don't want to bore the audience with just a bunch of lists. I just want to make my point that there are a ton of comparisons between the two. I think the only thing that is missing is a whistle and maybe context. I think that's it.
Well, I don't know. Some CEOs may whistle. I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
Do you think
In
you need
general.
one? And I'm sure at some point in time you probably wish you had a whistle.
No. All good. All good. That's a great list. It's true. There's a lot around teams, right? We're talking teams. And that's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
leaders lead to. So yeah, absolutely. I think coaching has become it's a mindset and a set of behaviors as opposed to contextual. It doesn't have to, it can be a team, it can be a company, it can be, you name it. So it's really the mindset and the behaviors that go into coaching that I think people are really embracing around the world.
Why do they call you? What is happening internally that they say we need a coach to help us out?
Oh, it could be a variety of things. There's a lot of transformation taking place right now, Christian, a lot of transformation. Digital transformation, the rapid pace of change. There's just so much happening that leaders are feeling that they're falling behind. They need someone to help look at situations with an external objective eye. How can they up their game to do a better job of leading their organizations, for example? Just a variety of things like that.
I'm curious what you see when a company calls you. What do you see as one of the main traits that they are struggling?
Well, if I have to choose, I would say leadership. That's an awfully big word, right? Leadership.
Yeah.
For example, it's a big word, but let's take example. Visionary. That's one thing we didn't talk about between what's important. Visioning, being able to vision. What does future look like? Taste like? Sound like? What does success look like? How will we measure it? Not just goals, but the vision itself. Leadership is often, we're often kind of stuck in our day to day, and we often don't pause long enough to say, you know what? Let's really think about the future. Let's really vision and imagine what that can look like. And so helping them get past that belief of tied to the present. Christian, the people are so tied to the present, but the truth is the present is just a reflection of the past because the past is what got us to the present. So if you really want to drive a team, an organization, a company into the future, you kind of have to let go of the present or cherry pick the very best stuff, let go of the rest, and move forward into a new direction. And that's scary for a lot of leaders. But I tell you, today more than ever, that's really important.
As you're even saying that, I'm thinking about all the turnover that happens in the NFL and the NBA. They're constantly starting over again.
Yeah. And every time a new team member comes in, every time a new leader comes in, it's a whole new team.
So, what is the most important thing a leader should have? What are some of those characteristics?
Well, I do think having a vision of what the future can be is really important. It's not about getting stuck in the mud and the mire and the drama and the problems of what's not going right. We could spend all day doing that. It's really about getting out of that into a place of what can be. That's what leadership is really. How could this team be? How could this organization be? What could this company achieve? And I really think that's a key part of a CEO or a C-suite leader's job. What does that vision look like? And once you can get people inspired and excited towards that, it's kind of like the Pied Piper, right? You just kind of follow. You want to follow those leaders. You want to follow the leaders that are exciting and inspired, so that, because you feel inspired yourself. So don't overlook the power of visioning. Uh, and it's I think that's foundational. And then coming out of that, that's the what, Christian. That's the bigger what that we're aiming for. And then empowering people to figure out the how. That's important. So you don't dictate how it's going to happen. You hired smart people, let those smart people figure out how it's going to happen. Because when they do that, 95% of actual success and buy-in comes from them coming up with the solutions themselves. So learning how to let.
So you mentioned dictate. And that stood out to me because the old way of coaching was a dictatorship. It was do it my way, no matter what. I don't think you can just tell somebody to do something without the why. I feel like that's a big word in sports today is athletes, they want the why. And it's up to the coach to give it that. I don't think a lot of coaches are capable of giving the why.
Well, that's why I said one of the most important things is being able to vision enough to be able to see what could be. We don't allow ourselves enough to do that. We get into the nuts and bolts of the plays or what we got to do and how we want to go about this. And it's all the outside. It's all what's happening outside, but we're not looking on the inside, the inspiration, the motivator, the inspiration, the motivators, what's going on inside that can motivate these people to want to be that and to achieve that. We don't spend enough time on that. It's too easy. And the old command and control, top down, here's how we're going to do this. Today's younger people, they don't want it anymore. They're not interested in that at all. One thing that's happened, I think today, this is my hypothesis, Christian, and this is what I'm seeing
Okay.
in the world. Leadership has become very personal. People want what they want. Yes, they're part of a team, but they still want to maintain their individuality. Why? Well, for the past 20 years, we've had social media. So each one of us has got our own story to tell, and each one of us is unique and different, right? So there's a sense of I am unique and I want to make sure my uniqueness comes through. And so, how do you, as a leader, this is another great people challenge, how do you, as a leader, take all these individual people, turn them into, and respect their differences, and yet turn them into a unified team? And I think, again, a lot of that drives back to a common vision and common values and common belief systems that we can align to.
Is that what you mean by how leadership is an inside out game? Is that what you were referencing earlier? Is that
A
the
little
explanation
bit.
about the vision?
Yeah, a little bit.
So can you explain that for me then?
Yeah, I don't know can I actually show a visual? I'm not sure if I can do that or not.
Hold on. Before we go any farther, make sure you click that subscribe button real quick and turn on your notifications. All right, here we go. Back to the show. Sure. Oh, we have slides?
I do. I have just a little visual. I thought it might be fun to show you.
Okay.
Be open to that?
Okay.
All right, let's see if this will work.
Absolutely.
Can
This
you
is
see it?
our explanation of inside out game.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Here we
Okay.
go. So this is the way that I really believe when I talk about inside out. So first of all, I have to remember, no change will ever take place on the outside. No sustainable change, Christian, unless you make change on the inside as humans. So let me explain what I mean. Okay. So,
Okay.
for example, if humans came with an owner's operating manual, this is how I think it would read. So bear with me here. Yeah.
Okay.
The first thing is what you think drives how you feel.
Mhm.
Now, both of those are inside jobs, if I can be so bold. They're inside work. I don't know what you're thinking and feeling, Christian. You don't know what I'm thinking and feeling, right? So that's all inside. However, how I feel is actually going to drive my behaviors, the way I act, the way I behave, what you see, the way I act, react, look, sound. That's what's going to change that. And then on top of that, how I behave is going to drive the results that I get. Now, all of those are on the outside. So you can see my behaviors and results when we judge a football player, when we judge a a team player, we are seeing behaviors and results, but we don't know anything about what's happening inside. So let's play with this. You tell me, let's say that you have a football player, we'll go with football, and that football player lacks confidence, right? And I
Okay.
would say, what's their common belief? And what's the belief that's going on inside of them? And let's say that it is, I'm not actually not that very good of a football player, or actually
Okay.
I don't know. What would you say would be
Yeah.
common?
Yeah. Well, it would say, I can't catch the ball. I'm
Brilliant.
constantly jumping off sides.
Perfect. Let's
Okay.
do, I just can't seem to catch the ball. So if I'm thinking I just can't seem to catch the ball, how am I going to feel every time that ball comes to me?
Scared.
Scared, anxious,
Yeah.
worried.
Yeah.
I get
Anxious,
into my
nervous.
head,
Yeah.
nervous, anxious. And so because I'm nervous and anxious, how am I going to behave?
Timid.
I'm not going to go for it. I'm not going to
Yeah.
reach for it. I know I'm going to lose it. And what will be the result?
Failure. A drop pass.
I dropped the pass. Do you see that? Now, here's
Yeah.
the thing. The importance of so when I think I can't catch a ball, what the outcome is, I don't catch a ball. What you think is what you get. And that's what I'm trying to get at when I say there can be no outer change, Christian, until you have that inner change first. So what you have to do as an executive coach, as a coach, is to work with the beliefs, the self-limiting beliefs that are holding that individual back from their true greatness, from their ability. So you change it. So there's two thought systems here, Christian. Hang with me.
Okay.
One is fear-based.
Ooh.
So fear-based is angst, anxiety, worry, lack of confidence, right? I'm disgusted, I'm angry, or frustrated. That's a fear-based belief. The other types of belief are what I call joy of possibility beliefs, like what can be. Remember I talked about the visioning of what can be? Now, each one of these pyramids, each pyramid could start with a fear-based belief, which is what you just did, I can't catch the ball. Or you could do a joy of possibility belief, which is, I am, what would you change it to?
Well, oh, hell, I can score a touchdown.
I can. But here's the thing. If they really don't believe it, that's too far. That's just too far. It's like saying it's like spraying fairy dust on saying, ooh, it's all going to be good. Instead, what I encourage is for people to think of, I am learning to. And why is that important? Well, I am learning to gives us a break. I'm learning to catch balls, right? I'm learning to, make a touchdown. I am learning, and we're all learning at all times. You remember when you were a kid, Christian, and you trying to learn how to ride a bike or skateboard for the first time or whatever, and you failed. Did you get back up? Of course you did. Of course you did, because you knew you were learning. But as adults, we stop doing that. As adults, we just suddenly think that if I can't do it the first time, I'm failing. If I can't do, and so we're so hard on ourselves. We stop allowing ourselves the freedom of learning. So when I work with executives, I ask them to play into the space of I am learning to. I'm learning to be a great leader. That means sometimes I'm going to do well, and sometimes I will fail, and that's okay because I will learn from it and get better. Does that make sense?
But it makes absolute sense. It's easily transferable into. It's what I see a lot. Are you done with the graph? I'm going to take it off real quick so we can see your beautiful face. The things that stand out to me, fear-based. That is evident in so many different situations. It's constantly screwing with your ability to succeed, and it's like a parasite. And it's fear-based.
Yeah.
I have to imagine that corporate leaders deal with the same thing. I'm not good enough. Oh, my speech sucks. They're all making fun of me. I can see it right now. Nobody believes in me. How do you coach that?
Well, and as CEOs, which is what I coach, they have so many stakeholders, and you will never please all the people all the time. Never. It's never going to happen. Between the employees, the leadership team, the journalists, the governor, the government, there's just regulators. No one's going to be happy all the time. And you have to learn to have internal validation instead of always looking for external validation. That's a super important one. So
can you go into internal validation? Because when you say internal validation, as an athlete, here's what I think. Okay. It's the self-talk.
So here's the thing I would say, the internal validation versus external, because often we look up, we look to our leaders, we look to our coaches to tell us we're doing a good job. And this talking, we often don't stop enough to say, hey, how am I doing? Am I doing okay? So I think another one is run your own race. We're so busy comparing ourselves to others. And when we do that, comparison is the mother of self-doubt. It's always the mother of self-doubt. Fair? It's just the mother
Oh
of
yeah.
self-doubt. When we constantly compare ourselves to others, we will end up with that lack of external validation, and then we put ourselves down. So I think that's really important. The other thing I do with leaders is and go way back to the very beginning and remind them that you are not born in fear. We're not born with fear. You've seen little kids. They run around 2, 3
Yeah.
years. They're not fearful at all. We put fear in them with the belief systems that we have, with the societal structures that we have of what's right and what's wrong. And so I help them remember that actually that's just a societal structure. You can choose to run your own race, right? And who are you really playing for? Yourself or others, right? So that's one. The other thing I like to do is focus on strengths. You know, the internal self-talk is very important. There's no question about that, Christian. But sometimes there's the devil and the angel, right? That devil can be really loud sometimes. So it doesn't always work.
Hmm.
So I think you have to focus on strengths. What are they really good at objectively? Like get them to get objectively about it, but also set small achievable goals and achieve those on a short, very little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, because that slowly builds up to a stronger sense of self. So you got to break down the bigger performance into smaller, manageable steps. And I know coaches do that in sports all the time, right? You practice a certain skill or a certain skill until it gets better and better and better. So I think that's important. I do believe in visualization. I think our imagination is one of the most underrated assets we have, whether as players or coaches. Again, what can be is probably one of the most important. Our human imagination is probably one of the most important assets we have, and we often don't pay attention to it because when we were kids, Christian, right? You're daydreaming, right? Pay attention.
Hmm.
Sit up straight. Get back to school, right? And so we kind of trained ourselves out of that. But that mental imagery can be really helpful. And I think that's a key one as well.
You mentioned visualization. I remember when I knew I was mentally weak is I was doing the visualization. I was imagining myself catching a pass and making a block. And at one point in time, sometimes it would get out of whack. And in my visualization, instead of making a positive play, I was missing the block or I was dropping the
Whoa.
pass. There has been so many times, Brenda, where I didn't believe in myself.
Mm.
I did
Well,
the only way I got out of it was to make a good play. I couldn't talk myself out
mm,
of the rut that I was in. And this
mm.
is real time. This is okay. You get 24 seconds. Okay. Coach is telling you to shake it off. Don't worry about it. The next play is the most important play. But it's easier said than done.
It is, but look, this is mind leadership. I call it mind leadership, not mind management. You know, management's like soldiers. You got to put manager. Leadership is inspiring. It's futures, and one of the things that I also have leaders all around the world doing is I do have them meditate because we have mind management. Mind leadership is one of the most important things we can do. And so when you have those tough moments, you're able to quickly center yourself and take the big deep breaths, whatever it takes to regain that alignment. I always say this is your inside self, this is your outside self. And when you're aligned in that space, when they're vertically aligned, that's when you're in a space where you can make the right decisions, you can act quickly and things like that. But I want to point out one thing that you talked about, which was the visualization. I think there's two things about visualization that we often make mistakes and don't always, I don't want to say do it right, but it has been proven to make a big difference, at least for me. Number one is what's the feeling of that visualization? It's one thing to see it in your mind's eye. It's another thing to feel it. You know, we are sentient beings, Christian, and I just showed you the pyramid of
Yeah.
how important feelings are. Feelings will drive behaviors. So if you can actually not just see it in your mind's eye, but actually feel it. What does it feel like to run for that touchdown? What does it feel like to lead that team to success, to a Super Bowl, whatever? What does that feel like? When we ground ourselves in that, the outcomes are dramatic. And that's been tested, by the way. It's kind of fun to explore that. But the second thing is when you visualize something, often what I found is people, they will visualize themselves as though they're on the outside looking down at themselves and watching themselves do that. But that's not real visualization. Visualization is when you have got the ball in your hand, you're looking down, you see the ball in your hand, and you're running over that's true visualization. When it's you looking down at the ball and you're running, not watching yourself, because that watching yourself is not how you're actually going to live it. You're going to live it holding the ball and looking forward. So those two things are really key. Feel it, see it through your eyes, your mind's eye. Yeah.
Something my wife says I lack, and this is emotional intelligence. Can you explain emotional intelligence and how it relates to the corporate world and sports?
Well, emotional intelligence is your ability to understand your own emotions and have compassion around what other people might be feeling as well. Understanding our own emotions, you'd think that would be pretty simple, right? But actually, how aware are we of what's happening internally from an emotional standpoint? I love to take the CEOs I work with through an exercise where we look at the 4 forms of self-care and self-health: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and ask them score them on a scale of 1 to 10, which one's strongest, which one's not. And when it comes to emotion, there's always a little bit of a hesitance, like, what do you mean exactly? And how is it different from mental? But it really is the way you feel. It's your resonance, right? And how clear are you on the resonance that's happening for yourself, first of all? Am I feeling more positive than negative? I love to have clients make a circle every morning and say, okay, are you going to be focused on more, when it comes to emotional scaling, are you going to be more positive or more negative? What's your overall feeling going to be today? So that's the first part about themselves. But the second part is about the emotions of others. And people always say, oh yes, I know we must have empathy. I'm going to tell you, Christian, I actually don't think we need empathy. I know that's pretty dramatic and people may not agree, but maybe controversial. But here's what empathy is to me. Empathy is, I know what you're feeling, Christian. I know exactly what you're feeling.
Yep.
That's not true. I have no idea what you're feeling. What I can do is express compassion. And compassion is, I understand what you are going through. It must be challenging. Tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
You see the difference? I know what you're thinking. I know how you're feeling. No, I don't, but I can have compassion for what you might be going through. And I can ask you questions to help me understand how I can support you more. And that's what I do with leaders, help them understand the deeper context of those emotional connections.
So you're teaching these corporate bosses to understand that. And then at some point in time, I think in order to build trust and to build a strong relationship, they would need to be able to do the same thing with their employees, with their players. Because the most important thing that I've seen from talking to all these different coaches and players, the one thing they want is trust. So a CEO would have to be able to show their employees that they care. It's got to be a component of success.
Well, look, people want to work with people they like and they trust. Whether it's a boss, a peer, a direct report, a team player on a football, they want to work with people they like and they trust. So those two are really paramount. So what are you doing to be liked and trusted, right? What do you do?
Yeah.
A lot of the time, I think one of the most overlooked characteristics of any leader, and you can tell me if this fits with sports as well, is the art of listening. Listening is actually a learned behavior. We can hear, we're born hearing. Most people are born hearing. That's the act of perceiving sound. But we have to learn to listen. That's why little kids pay so much attention to what's going on, because they're learning to listen. And as leaders, sometimes we forget to do that. We don't always listen as well as we could. And honestly, a lot of what people, especially young people today, they just want to be heard. You don't have to agree with them. That's not critical to agree with them. But they just want to know that their voice was heard, that they had a say. And then if the leader decides otherwise and explains why, that's fine. But so
Yeah.
much, I would say the single most important skill as a leader, and I don't care what level you are, is to listen. Because you can't know it all yourself. You've got to go deep down into the organization to understand what's actually going on. And the only way you can find out is by listening.
The one thing that gets thrown around a lot in my business is culture building. Every single coach press conference comes up, they talk about building a culture. So, two-part question. What is culture to you? And then how do you build it? And then how do you sustain it?
Yeah. Well, I love the question because I think culture is, so you remember we talked about the vision, right? And how important it is to have a clear vision of what success looks like in the future. Not a goal, but a vision, like what it tastes like, looks like, sounds like. What we often think of as culture is also a what. It's also what we're aiming for. But actually, I believe that culture is a how. Culture
Okay.
is the way we act, the way we react, the way we look, the way we sound, the way we think. That's culture. It's kind of like the feel of the place. It's all those behaviors and how we act, react, look, sound, and think. And we want to build a culture, Christian, that's going to allow us to get to that vision. So culture is actually enabler. It's an enabler. It's a how to get us to a bigger what. So building the right culture, modeling the way we want to act, react, look, sound, and think is going to be key for leaders to establish that role model of saying, and when we act like this, when we react like this, when we look and sound like this, we are going to achieve success because that's going to get us to the vision. You have to have the culture that fits to the vision you want to achieve. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. What I see coaches lacking is authenticity. Sometimes the words don't match the person or the actions and the messaging, they don't align. You're left confused.
I'm reminded of a very brief story. There was two co-founders working together, leading an organization, and one of them was tired of this sloppy, dress whatever code, and so he sent out a memo and he said, as of starting this Monday, our dress code is X, Y, and Z, and that's the way it's going to be, and we need to button up because we have clients coming to our office. And the co-founder was on vacation that day, came in on Monday dressed the way he always did. Everyone else dressed up. From that moment on, no one dressed up again, right? So it kind of goes back to what you said, that you've got to look up to understand what the appropriate culture is. But at the upside, that higher level, you've got to be aligned. You've got to be really aligned to what success looks like in order to create a great culture.
Have you ever heard of the pet cat theory? When a boss plays favorites and gives more attention to somebody else, even though they don't deserve it, they haven't earned it, or there may be a better option somewhere else. In the corporate world, it would be, I mean, I'm not getting promoted. How do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
Well, and I'm working with an organization right now who's had this, the CEO. They are an organization known for promotion from within. So that if you stay long enough in the organization, you get promoted. But there was a need in the organization, and so the CEO made a very uncomfortable decision for a lot of the organization, which is he brought in someone from the outside for a very, very high level
Mm-hmm.
position, which had never really been done before, and really had to deal with that. But what's interesting is I coached him through this, and ultimately it came down to this. He had to do what was the right thing for the organization as a whole. That's his job. As a steward of the organization, he has to do what's right for the organization as a whole. And in his judgment, he believed that there was nobody that was going to be able to do that internally. He needed to bring someone from the outside. Now, that's a really tough decision because, again, you want people to trust you and to like you. It came down to a lot of great communication, being really clear to everyone exactly why he made that decision, that he felt it was the right thing to do. Now, obviously, it puts a lot of pressure on the new person coming in from the outside, but ultimately, it's not over yet, but it's going really well. And you have to have the kind of communication that people feel comfortable saying, okay, I get it. But it took a few months. It took a while.
When you look at successful organizations, do they all have the same characteristics?
Well, I wouldn't say all the same, but I think there's some there's very many common denominators. One I said is I said having that really crystal clear vision. You know,
Yeah.
people want to get up in the morning and know that they're going to they're going to be doing something that that's linked to a greater purpose, something bigger than them. They want to know they have clear delineation of responsibilities to achieve that vision. They are going to play a role in how that happens. And that's how you keep employees motivated, right? Don't dictate the how. As I said, hire smart people, allow them to figure it out and allow them to fail. That's another thing I would say is a common characteristic. Fail, Christian, but fail small, right? Like make small mistakes regularly and learn from them. Make it a learning culture. Okay, you made a mistake. A team member of mine today just made a mistake. We sat down. I said, okay, so what did you learn from that? It was X, Y, and Z. Okay, you ever going to do that again? No. So, okay, we're done. I mean, there's only so much you can do. I can't change that. We can't go back and change it. So I always say, don't underestimate the importance of failure, because what we don't want teaches us what we do want. And that's how we learn.
So I was talking to my dad the other day. He was telling a story how his coach, when he was in high school, openly berated him. And to this day, he hates that. He hates the public shaming, reprimanding players in front of their peers. We kind of had an argument because I feel that sometimes everybody needs to know that they're all accountable to one another. In certain situations, I'm fine with. And is that frowned upon in the corporate world?
I am a fan of compliment in public and punish in private.
Okay, I think that's exactly what he said, Brenda. He actually
Oh,
used
really?
those exact words, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm a big
and I was
fan.
like, get out of here.
Yeah, I think because here's the thing: no, certain people can handle it, okay, but it's a small population, part of the population that can handle that. Again, if you look at failure as a bad thing, which is basically what happens when you berate someone, then they don't want to fail again. If they never fail, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this to you: the fastest way to completely ruin sports, any sport, football, whatever, never fail. Because if there weren't failure once in a while, there'd be no sport. I mean, think about it. Michael Jordan gets the ball. Every single time he gets the ball, we know 100% of the time he's going to make a basket. How boring is that? The fun comes from seeing if they're going to do it right or not, or will they make it? They made it. That's the fun of the game. So you want to completely ruin sports? Never fail, because no one would show up at the games. So my point is, if you look at failure as actually a real blessing, because that's how we get better. And you've seen teams that go from nothing to something and how exciting it is. That's because they failed, and they failed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How the leader addresses that failure, to me, makes the difference between a Super Bowl ring on your finger and a mediocre team.
Go get me some knowledge.
Coach to win, right?
Yeah, so it's Coached to Win. I'm Brenda Bence, and I am Coached to Win.
Okay, sure. Ready? I am Brenda Bence, and I'm Coached to Win.
That's it. Let me stop this recording real quick because sometimes it takes forever. I